I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about havening. This is something that in the last 6 months, it just keeps popping up in weird spots where I hear that I was watching Justin Bieber's documentary recently. He was talking about havening. I've heard it. Actually, I follow the Amen Clinic. They were recommending havening. And also apparently the Kardashians are now talking about havening. And this is really a tool to add to your fertility toolkit to really help to deal with trauma, anxiety, stress, and insomnia. It's an interesting technique, and we're going to go through a demo, something you can do by yourself. And also, if there's childhood trauma, having a practitioner in place to really help you identify that and help you dig deeper and then have the trauma leave your body. So excited for you to listen to this podcast, for you to learn exactly what is havening and how this can help you on the fertility journey. I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 4 spots available per month to work with us. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. And this call is for you if you meet at least one of these criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This calls for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. That's FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. One theme that keeps coming up with the couples in our FabFertile Couples Coaching Program is sleep. Whether it's insomnia, having a hard time falling asleep, waking up at night, or feeling tired when we wake up, sleep is critical for fertility and hormones. And that's why I'm so excited to have Blue Blocks as our podcast sponsor. So we're exposed to blue and green light from our phones, our tablets, our computers, indoor lights, and more. And this exposure impacts our melatonin production. And melatonin is essential for both female and male fertility. It helps determine the frequency and duration of our cycle and impacts sperm. There's lots of blue light blocking glasses on the market, but the ones from Blue Blocks, they've actually compared other popular brands, and Blue Blocks block 100% of blue and green light while other brands fall short. So I have their sleep glasses. They have red lenses, and the ones I have are a little translucent frame, and they're so stylish and really cool. And so they eliminate 100% of the blue and green light in the 400 nanometer to 550 nanometer range. So this is the exact range that has been shown in clinical studies to disrupt melatonin and negatively impact your sleep. So all you do is wear your sleep glasses after sunset until it's time for bed, and you'll notice improved sleep after just one use. And it's also cool to use when you're flying for managing jet lag. So I got to say I was a little skeptical about the noticing improvement after one use, but literally I use these glasses and my sleep is actually already pretty good. I used them for one day, and I have to say after one day, I had the best sleep of my life. I just felt so rested. So these glasses, they ship free and they're tracked for all orders anywhere in the world. And also they have all their frames come in prescription, non-prescription, and reading glasses. Plus you can send in your frames and they'll add the blue light blocking and green light blocking lenses to your frame. So this is an easy hack that you can add to your fertility toolkit. All you do is go to BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com. Use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout and receive a 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast to receive your 15% discount. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And I've got a favor to ask you. If you are enjoying learning about the functional approach to fertility, consider going to iTunes and rating and reviewing the podcast. This is how it helps the show reach more people that are struggling with infertility, knowing that there's another approach that really can get to the bottom of why it's not working in the first place. So all you need to do is, if you're on the app or the desktop, just go in and consider leaving a 5-star rating and leave a review. And there is step-by-step instructions in the show notes showing you exactly how to do that. So if you can just take a few minutes, just take the few minutes right now. You can pause this recording, come back, leave the review. It would really mean the world to me and help others that are on the fertility journey as well. Take care. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently, restored. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under,
Many, many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. You can't test egg quality.
It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or he has a zinc deficiency.
Like there can be a root cause to these symptoms that are, quote unquote, period problems, that the doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
And some part of you knows that if you can reframe your journey from not want to struggle, or if it is struggle, learn how to embrace the struggle. Learn how to embrace it.
Most conditions in the child occur during the 9 months of development. It's the genetic switches are turned on or turned off, and they're pre-programmed. So you are in such a powerful, amazing position to do amazing things for your kids.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Michele Paradise to the podcast, and we're digging into how Havening can help on the fertility journey. Michele Paradise lives between London and LA. She's a working mother of 2 grown children, a former international model, muse to Philip Tracy and Zandra Rhodes, with over 20 years experience on the runway in Milan, Paris, London, and New York. And in 2000, she left the fashion industry and trained in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP. And she is a clinical hypnotherapist, personally trained by the co-creator of NLP. And she has 10 years of experience training thousands of people in NLP and communication skills for business and personal growth. 2014, she was trained in Havening techniques, which is a psychosensory therapy to reduce stress and anxiety caused by trauma in childhood and adulthood. And in 2015, Deepak Chopra invited her to become his personal development coach on his digital platform, Jiyo, if I'm pronouncing that right, Jiyo, Jiyo. Where she has her own channel, The Healing Haven, and has over 30 videos demonstrating havening for all levels of trauma and anxiety. Thanks so much for listening. I'm so thankful that you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you know someone else who is on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Michele, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here talking about one of my favorite subjects.
Oh, that's right.
Havening.
Well, first of all, can you share with us how you came to do this work?
Yeah, I've been in the field of human behavior and trauma for about 20 years now, coming up to 20 years. And I started being a patient, a client myself, and I went to get some help. And I met this man who really helped me in a short period of time. And I asked him what he was doing or what he had done. And he mentioned something called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP for short. It's a bit of a mouthful. And it's a way of a set of sort of methodologies to help you change your mind for good, which is the name of my company. So I sort of use that idea. I went on my first course. I went and studied to be a practitioner, and then I became a master practitioner. And then I was so taken by it. I had been trained by one of the co-creators of it, Dr. Richard Bandler, and I became his assistant, one of his assistants for about 10 years, and loved it. On that journey, do you want me to carry on to how I got to Havening? Yeah. Okay. On that journey, there was hypnosis involved with NLP. And so I went and studied to be a clinical hypnotherapist, which was a great blend of the two methodologies. Within that space, I met some Haveners, and Havening techniques, as we now call it, was very new to training. It had been around for 20 some years, but no one had been trained in it. The doctors that created it, their twin brothers, Doctors Rudin, Steve, and Ron, they sort of used it on their patients with great success. So Paul McKenna actually encouraged them to start training people, and I was one of the first cohort. And that was probably about 6 or so years ago. I've not looked back. It's changed my life, and it's changed my client's life. I highly recommend it. I hope that gives you a background of how I got there.
Awesome. Yeah, it is this. It's interesting. So Havening only came on my radar probably about 6 months ago. So dealing with some mood issues with my son. So we had him at the Amen Clinic, and as one of the recommendations was Havening because he has a needle phobia, and we were trying to get some blood work done, and he wasn't able to do it. Now, I did contact someone in my area, and I was never able to get an appointment, unfortunately. So I had never actually experienced it myself, but I saw it then about 6 months ago, and then I watched the Justin Bieber documentary, and he was talking about it, and then I heard his wife talking about it. And then I'm like, okay, this is, if we hear it all over the place, I need to dig into what exactly this is. And so then I wanted to have an expert to come on and share with our listeners of really how this could help with going through the fertility journey, and really how this could be something to have in your toolkit to help you along the way. And yeah, so how can Havening help when you're dealing with a struggle such as going through the fertility journey?
Well, just before I answer that, if you don't mind, Dr. Stephen Rudin, one of the twin brothers, is a dentist. And he had a lot of people that were terrified of dentists and needles. And he used Havening before a session with them, before actually doing anything to them. He could get them in a really good state. So it's very quick. Okay, good. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, if I may, because you're the fertility expert. And then I'm probably best placed to answer that question. What do you think the biggest struggles are for people going on the fertility journey?
Yeah, a lot of it is, we help people from a functional standpoint. So we're looking at food sensitivities and gut infections, environmental toxins. And then we're also looking at the mental emotional side of it. And most people that I've worked with, they've tried naturally for at least 2 years, or they've had at least one failed IUI or IVF or more. So they could even be told that donor eggs are their only option. And we help people get pregnant naturally when they've been told they have, donor eggs is their only option, or if they do go to IVF and prove their success. So they could be in a very a hopeless place. They could be gone through years of trying. I had both my kids with donor eggs, so I know what this journey is like. And it can be, and I typically will work with a type A busy professional, everything they've done in their life, they've achieved. And now working really hard and doing everything they possibly can, researching, every last treatment possible, and it hasn't worked. And that's where the functional approach comes in. And then, and the functional side of thing, obviously includes the mind, body, spirit, the spiritual and the mind side of things. So that's why I think having these sorts of things to help with the trauma. And I'm just kind of rambling here, but I know.
Oh, it's great.
I know when I was going through fertility, I wouldn't even have framed it as trauma, but looking back, I was told I'd never have my own biological children. And I just went straight into action and, went off and had both my kids with donor eggs. But there is a lot of grief, sadness, trauma, and potentially a loss of hope.
Yeah. And I hope this is appropriate to mention, but in my life, years ago, I've personally known 2 women who were told they couldn't conceive, or they were really struggling to conceive, so they adopted. Both women had natural births, they had children after that. And what we discussed was the fact that they relaxed and they released some of the stress and the worry about, and I'm not saying this works for everybody, but where I was going with this is that I think stress plays a major part in conception. And I don't know, would you agree with that? Has that been your experience?
I know some people are still told this analogy, but wait a minute, women in war-torn countries are having children. Stress has no bearing on this, which to me is just an outdated notion. And we don't know, even though women in war-torn countries are people that potentially are addicted to drugs or whatever it may be, we don't know it may not have affected their fertility, but it could have affected all sorts of other things in their body.
Absolutely.
And for people listening to this podcast, it's our fertility. But that analogy to me is it's just horrible analogy, actually.
It is. And, if I may, I've recently, I didn't mention, I've recently been training with Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a trauma specialist, and he talks about childhood trauma, developmental and relational. And what I think so many of us don't realize, because I didn't for a long time, is how much we store in our bodies and our minds from childhood. And interestingly, it can start in utero for us in utero. So there's a lot of pre-verbal trauma that we're not even aware that we're carrying around with us. And this causes us to adapt our personality coping strategies, survival strategies, which we don't even realize we're doing until maybe we get older and they start to get in our way, like people pleasing and high achieving, overachieving, things like they're all trauma responses. Anyway, I digress. Let me get back to havening. Should I just explain a little what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Havening techniques is what we call it now. It's had many iterations. And one of them I remember was amygdala depotentiation therapy. So I'm so glad they changed the name. But it is, havening is the transitive verb for haven, and haven means safe place. So what happens is when we do the havening touch, which obviously not many of us are able to do at the moment in the circumstances, it releases delta waves, which is sort of our deep sleep and healing state. And it automatically puts us in a safe place so that we can then focus or connect to maybe a traumatic event or some really overwhelmingly negative feelings, emotions that we find very uncomfortable to sit with, or, voices that we hear on a daily basis talking to us in a bad way, that sort of internal chatter. So we get the client initially into a safe place so he or she feels safe to even go there. And the beauty of havening is it's content free. So we don't actually need to know the details of it, and the client doesn't need to know the details of it either. They just connect with the feeling that they get when maybe they have that memory or when they have that emotion. So what happens is there are 3 parts of the body that have been shown through research to release the highest levels of delta waves. And the first one is the face. And the second is shoulders to elbows in a circular motion. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later. And then it's the hands, as if you're brushing sand off your hands. So as a facilitator, before the pandemic, I would work one-to-one with the client, and I would literally sit across from them or to the side of them, depending on their comfort level. And I would facilitate. I would do this for them. I would touch, stroke the face with clean hands. Of course, we always did that before the pandemic, and shoulders to elbows. And you come back in a circular motion, and then hands, which is a wonderful feeling to receive that. But what we've also discovered, Mother Nature is amazing how, you needs must. So we're in this situation where we can't facilitate it. And we're working with people on Zoom, Skype, and various other platforms, and they self-haven. And I miss the connection to my clients. However, I think for the clients, it's almost better because, for example, in a previous session, I would haven them, and then I would teach them how to self-haven. And a lot of times I would find out that they didn't do it very much because maybe they weren't that comfortable with it, or they became reliant on me doing it for them, to them. But when you do it like we're doing it now, they do it automatically. They have to. That's how it works. So they self-haven, and I will self-haven with them. And then we share these mirror neurons between us. So we're passing this energy back and forth to each other. And it's really very, very successful. And it sets the person up immediately to be able to self-haven, to be comfortable with it, and to do it after the session and between the session, because I don't think anybody should wait 7 days or whatever to meet the practitioner again before they do it. So it's something that you can take away immediately. It's free. All you need is clean hands. And when you're in this delta wave state, we have several techniques. One is called event havening, and that's when the client connects back to an event. And that could be something that maybe happened in childhood or happened last week. And it's really encoded in a traumatic way. And we have an acronym called EMLI, E-M-L-I. And that's sort of the perfect storm for trauma. And what that stands for is E is for event. M is for meaning, and that is the meaning that it had to you, the event, because 2 people could watch or experience the same event and have different meanings. Mm-hmm. So event meaning. L is for landscape, and that is landscape of your brain at the time, because sometimes we're in a much more resilient state when we experience something, and sometimes we're in a very vulnerable state. And when we're in a vulnerable state, it encodes I believe it encodes more deeply and more profoundly. And the I is the inescapability. So I'll just tell a very quick story, if I may, to illustrate what this looks like. I had a young man come to see me who was up for a promotion, and he was needing to do some public speaking, and he was terrified of it. It was a full-blown phobia. I'm a presenter, so he came to me, I think, believing that I was going to teach him how to present better and more comfortably. But what I actually did is I just started asking him some questions, which I call the Archaeological Dig, where you start asking questions about things that perhaps people don't expect about their past. I found out that when he was about 6 years old, he was requested to stand in front of the class and read, and he did not want to. So he stumbled and faltered, and he got very distressed and started crying and ran out of the room. So there it was. There was the encoding trauma, the event. The situation, the event was reading in front of the class. The meaning to him that it had was, I'm stupid, I can't read. The landscape of his brain at the time was quite vulnerable. His father was without a job. He was unemployed, and the situation at home had changed. There was the inescapability. He couldn't leave. I mean, he had to come back to school the next day. He couldn't move to another town or move schools or whatever. So it was the perfect storm. And he had adapted. He made his life work around that and didn't actually think about it very much at all until I brought it up about, 20 some years later, or he remembered it, I should say. So we havened the event, and within a very short space of time, half an hour or 45 minutes, he was not able to remember the event in the way, and that's how it works. So a lot of people say, well, what happens? So at the end of it, I would say, so let's revisit the event. And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I'll get, after a few rounds of havening, they'll say, I can't really see it. It's really fuzzy. It's out of focus. And that's really what you want to get to, because that way you can still have the memory, but you don't have the emotions attached to the memory. And I've skipped over a bit, which some people may be wondering what happened in between. You do rounds with the client, and it is the first part of it is them to remember the event, whichever way that could be, visually, emotionally, auditorily, and they retrieve that or components of it. And then you apply the havening touch, or they apply the havening touch. And then the third part of it is distractions. We invite them, planning it in advance. So I would say to somebody, during the session, I'm going to ask you to count 30 things. So I really want to check in with them to make sure that they're comfortable with those things. Because in the beginning, we used to say, well, let's walk up steps, or let's walk by the sea, by the edge of the sea. And some people had water phobias. Some people had height phobias. So what we do is we get the client to tell us things that they're connected to, maybe books or pets or trees or flowers. I personally get them to count backwards because that really interrupts patterns. So they'll count 30, 29, and the whole time they're thinking of the thing and they're connecting to the thing that they're counting. And I'm talking over them. So both brains are engaged, and I'm getting them to sort of defocus on the event. We also do lateral eye movement. So with eyes closed, you move the eyes to the left and to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. That really interferes with the pattern. Sometimes we even bring in humming, where you hum a couple bars of a nursery rhyme or happy birthday. And all of these distractions really enable us to more quickly, the combination of the havening touch and the distractions allow us to down-regulate the emotions around the memory or around the event or around a feeling that we actually have no idea where it came from.
So it's important to have someone when you're reliving the event, which obviously can be traumatic in itself. That's, I guess, the whole point. You keep reliving it over again. Is it important to have doing that by yourself or with someone? Can it be, I don't know, what's your take on that?
Great question. I have, and I just found this out, so I'll share it. The number one self-havening video on YouTube. It is an event havening one. And I've put a disclaimer, or I've put a warning in the text and said, please, this is only for small things. Like, let's say you just got a parking ticket or a speeding ticket and you're really activated. It's fine for that. But no deep traumas, because you're absolutely right. Those kind of things really require you to work with a licensed practitioner, because you could have what is called an abreaction. It can also bring up other layers of other traumatic events or emotions. It's such a beautiful technique when you're a practitioner because you have so many places to go. You have so many things you're able to do. But when you're doing that on your own with a video, you don't have that. And that can be dangerous. So definitely, if you do watch my video, don't do it for anything large at all or anything that is a deep-seated trauma, because you can get into a lot of trouble. And I wouldn't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm. And can you share with some research or anything you can share or direct us to about the efficacy of havening?
Yes. Well, we have a wonderful website called havening.org, and it's full of resources, and all of the licensed practitioners are on there as well. All of us, or most of us, are now working online, so you could work with anybody in the world. It's no longer geographical as it was before. You can get a feel. Some people specialize in, there's a woman who specializes, she's a midwife, so she does a lot of work with pregnancy havening. So you can have a really good look for what you're looking for. There's hundreds of havening practitioners, and they're all very highly trained. And there's lots of information about havening on there, and videos and resources. So it's a great place to go. It's havening.org.
Okay, perfect. And so, so we talked a little bit about the risks. So it's the more of the event could be very powerful or overwhelming. Is that kind of the risk of doing this by yourself then, without a practitioner?
I think so. I mean, that's been my experience, because I've had people, you can see some of the comments on my video. It'll say, oh, this really worked and it was great. And half hour later, don't even remember it. Doesn't work like that for everybody, by the way. Some people say, this didn't help me as much as I wanted to, and I'm now reaching out to you. So I offer a 15-minute free exploration Zoom call, so that people can talk to me. And that doesn't mean they have to work with me. It might just be that I can answer some of their questions or give them some advice, like I just did, of not doing event havening or transpirational havening on your own following a video. The videos are really just for information, or, as I said, for something really small. Maybe you've had a disagreement with somebody and you can't let it go. And that would be a great time to do some event havening. But could I just mention the sort of background of, or the philosophy of havening in that Dr. Ron Havening, there's a good name, Dr. Ron Rudin, who really created it, Dr. Ronald Rudin and his brother, Dr. Steve. Dr. Ronald Rudin said he sees it as a psychosensory therapy. And when he was explaining what that meant, he said the way he sees it, there are 3 pillars of therapy or therapeutic intervention. And the one that we're all familiar with is the psychologies. So that's the talking therapies, obviously. And then there's psychopharmacology. So that's meds, that's like SSRIs and benzos and things like that. And he sees the talking therapies, it's more to do with the mind, and the psychopharmacology is more to do with the body. It affects, how to interfere with some of the adrenaline and cortisol downloads and to release more serotonins. And havening is psychosensory. So what that means, it's mind-body connected. So we are dealing with the things in the mind and talking to the person about them, but we're not staying in this sort of conscious intellectual state. We're allowing the body, through the havening touch, to release some of the stress, anxiety, or trauma. And in my experience, that's the only way that you really get a result, is when you connect the mind and the body to release stress, anxiety, or traumas.
As part of our program, we include EFT, or emotional freedom technique. How would havening compare to EFT?
I've studied TFT, which is similar. It's just, I think it was the precursor to EFT, and it's really good. And the only thing that I would say, because I think everything has its place and not everything works for everybody. Mm-hmm. But what I found as a TFT practitioner was there were lots of algorithms. And this is done in fact, Dr. Rudin, I think, met Roger Callahan, who started TFT, and tapping. And this is a similar thing in that it deals with the meridians from Chinese medicine. So it following the meridians. But what I was saying about it, to finish that thought, is that it's sometimes when you're distressed, remembering an algorithm, I found quite challenging for some people. And this is much easier. There's just a handful of techniques, and they all basically, you're doing the same thing in terms of what parts of the body you're touching and the eye movements and maybe the humming and the counting. There's very little to have to remember. And I just find that people find this more accessible when they're distressed. I was living in LA for a while, and I had clients, the traffic is horrendous. And I had clients that would say they were so stressed out driving, and that they would get to a red light and just sit there and hand haven. And that's what I love about it. It's so quick, and it seems so simple, but there is a lot of science to it. And there's a very good video on YouTube by my friend Tam Johnston, and she does a 20-minute video illustrating what happens to the brain when you do the Havening touch, the Havening technique. So if there's some people that out listening to this that want to know about the science of it and to see how it all connects up, the GABA and the amygdala and all of that, that's a very good video to watch. Her name is Tam Johnston, and it's on YouTube, and it's about how Havening works.
Okay, great. And so as far as helping with, like you mentioned, with stress and anxiety, so obviously there's situational, that would be where you would use some of the like parts of the technique, but how would you use it then with stress or anxiety?
Well, the thing is, event havening is quite formal. It's quite a protocol, but beyond that, you can just take components of it and use it. So, as I said, the guy in the car with the hand havening, sometimes we just need to sit, and this is a great quick takeaway. If you're feeling unsafe in any way, if maybe you're spinning out of control or you're feeling highly activated, if you can, do whatever you can. But if you can, I always like to preface any havening with a set of 3 breaths. And what I do is inhale for 4, exhale for 8. And I like to layer it up with resources and color. So you breathe in for 4 and you breathe in a resource that you want. And maybe it's calm, and connect a color to it, a calm color in your mind. And when you exhale out, for example, stress, and connect a color to that. And I do a set of 3. And, it's been medically proved that a set of 3 breaths resets you and sort of rebalance you. And then I'll do some quick havening. I might just do shoulders to elbows, and you must come back in a circular motion. So that means come away from the arm and around and up. It's not just sliding back up, it's around and up. And I'll just say safe, 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 or calm, 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 calm. And you might not want to do it that quickly. You might want to slow it down. A great technique for people that struggle to sleep or wake up in the middle of the night, and is, for example, I used to wake up in the middle of the night. Fortunately, it doesn't happen anymore, but I would wake up and I would just prop myself up a little bit, and I would do shoulder to elbow havening. And there's a reason why, which I'll tell you in a moment. And I would just do some affirmational havening. I am sleepy. I am cool, because sometimes you're hot. I am calm. My brain is at rest. Whatever you are dealing with, you want to counterbalance that with an affirmation. And the most important thing to remember about an affirmation with affirmational havening is always stated in the positive. Like, you wouldn't say, I don't want to. You would say, I want to, or I am. And you state it in the present, because where focus goes, energy flows. So you want to keep it in the present. The beauty of that is you'll do that for a few minutes, and when you wake up, you're hugging yourself. It's really nice to wake up hugging yourself. So that's why I say keep it to the mid part of your body, to the shoulders and the elbows. I've taught it to several of my clients, and I was talking to one yesterday, and I said, so how's the sleep going? She said, fine. She said, I haven't needed to use havening, to what you taught me. And then she said to me, but you know what I think it is? I think it's just knowing that I have something has calmed me down. That I
there's a lot
have
of panic, right? Where if every night you wake up between 2 or 3, or you can't back out to sleep, and it's hours and hours, and then it just gets this whole pattern of that too. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And havening is, and thank you for using that word, because it's, one of my favorite words. We are patterns, and it's a pattern interrupt. That's really what it is. It's interrupting your patterns, sometimes your thought patterns or your physical patterns. And if anybody does, any of your listeners do meditation, it's such a beautiful setup for meditation to just, sit in the place where you're going to meditate, do the breathing if you do the breathing or the presence, and just do some havening to set yourself up, because you go into this beautiful delta wave state, which is quite meditative anyway. And you just feel really calm and really safe. And then whatever you choose as your meditation, it just makes it more profound. You get a much more profound result.
Yeah. So helping with stress, anxiety, so trauma and PTSD, which would be more the event havening, but with the stress or anxiety, you can use it for situational. And then you say situational for insomnia or sleep issues. And then would you do an event one too, if it's been like long-term? Like we work on a functional standpoint too. We're looking at gut infections and food sensitivities, which help with sleep, but also this is a good thing to add to your toolkit. Would you then use that as have you had the event havening for insomnia or sleep?
Yeah, well, I like to do affirmational. Well, there's a couple things you can do. This is a great bookend. You can do transpirational. What that means is you're transpiring, you're expiring the emotion. So the best way for me to describe it is imagine a big old oak tree standing in the park, and deep in the roots are your emotions and the negative ones I'm talking about in this sense. And when you do the havening, transpirational havening, it's quite different. You're saying the negative emotion or the painful emotion repeatedly as you're havening. So you might say fear, fear, fear. And what's happening, and it's great to have this visualization, is imagine that deep in the roots, there's fear, and it's kind of being shimmied up through the trunk of the tree and out onto the branches and ultimately onto the leaves, and then it evaporates. It's just a wonderful way to simply and easily let go of negative emotion. So that's the first part of it. And the second part would be then to focus on what you want instead of, which would be affirmational. Now, this is the interesting bit, because not everybody is going to be there. They're not going to go from fear into I am safe, because they might need to have a bit more of a belief change before they can do that. So I've got this 4-filter system, which is very easy. And you would start, we'll use safe, like being safe. So instead of going, I am safe, and using that as an affirmation, because sometimes it might not feel congruent to you. It's like, no, I'm not safe. I don't feel safe. So you start with, what if I could feel safe? So it's creating the possibility. And you run it through these 4 filters. And the first one is, what if? The second is, I can choose to. So the second would be, I could choose to feel safe. I can choose to feel safe. And then the third one is, I choose to feel safe. And the final one is, I feel safe or I am safe. And what you will discover, and it's different for every emotion, and this is what I've discovered with my clients, is sometimes you'll want to stay in the what if for a bit longer, and that could be a couple days, that could be a couple minutes, whatever. And you will move through the others, and you'll begin to know where you are much more quickly. And then you stay with that havening of that one filter, and then you test it by moving on to the next one. And if you're not ready yet, you're not ready yet. So just to recap, you start with what if. So what if I can feel safe? What if I can feel safe? And maybe you might spend days gently, couple minutes a day, just havening that. Or maybe you want to test the next one. I can choose to feel safe. And that feels okay. So maybe you want to go on to the next one. I choose to feel safe. And that one, maybe there's some resistance and you want to stay there for a while before you can go into I am safe. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. What if I can choose, I choose, and then I feel safe. Yeah. And just cycle through and see what, as you say, which one resonates.
Yeah. And the next day, if you were dealing with something else like rage or sadness, it might be completely different. You might power right through them and get to I am, or you may stay in what if for a much longer time. So there's no right or wrong. There's no, this is going to work like this every time. It's really, that's the beauty of it. It's so personal. It's so specific to you, where you are in that moment, what your needs are in that moment. And you have so many tools to help you to go through it, to come out the other side. I actually pioneered something which is quite interesting, because we're talking about fertility, but I was fascinated by what happens in people's birth, because I would work with clients and we would do really well dealing with the layers of things that they wanted to deal with, but they would get stuck. And I began to think about, because I had a traumatic birth, so that's why I started to think about this. I was born with umbilical cord around my neck and I was dying, and my mother wasn't doing too well either. So it was quite a traumatic birth. At the time, I didn't realize this, but I was a very anxious child, and, I won't go into my story necessarily, but I began to think about it, and I thought, birth and pregnancy has so much to do with how the child comes out. If the mother is stressed, if the mother is anxious, giving those hormones to that, through the umbilical cord to that child and, or to that fetus. And then if you have a really traumatic birth, which I did, that trauma has never been addressed and you're not aware of it. And sometimes people aren't even aware because their mother is no longer with them or they've never had that conversation. So I began to add it to my intake questionnaire. It was like the final question. Do you know, or can you find out if you had a traumatic birth? And it just opened it up for a lot of people. It certainly helped me because it helped me through my birth trauma. But I would go back to birth with them, talking about it if they knew anything. And if they didn't, we could do what is called outcome havening, where you can change the outcome of an event. And I did it with birth. So I would take them right back into the womb. And, we've all seen, if we haven't given birth, we've seen films and we've talked about it. And people's minds are very creative. So I would creatively take them through the whole process, down the birth canal, into, being born, and even into maybe the first year or whatever of their life, depending on what their needs were. And it was amazing how it really cleared up a lot of stuff for people because they didn't realize that that's where their first trauma was, or that's where the encoding trauma was.
Yeah, and many people dealing with on the fertility journey, they could have experienced a traumatic birth of their first child, and they're dealing with secondary infertility, and then there's fear and anxiety and stress associated with that, and that can kind of be an emotional blockage then for a second child as
Absolutely.
Well. Mm-hmm.
And also, if you've had a traumatic birth, it's on a cellular level also that you have this memory, and it might make you more anxious about giving birth without you even realizing it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I also discovered. Because some women had extreme anxiety about giving birth. They wanted to get pregnant, but they didn't want to give birth. So was one stopping the other? And when we dealt with their birth trauma, they seemed a lot more relaxed and open to the idea of it. And I think, you're the expert, but I think there could be something there for fertility as well.
Oh, for sure.
Finding out about people's own births and what is encoded in them, and if there are any hidden traumas or resistance or fears around that, and that could be preventing them from actually getting pregnant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, the childhood trauma piece, we see a number of people that are on the fertility journey, and they're the childhood trauma piece. But could you give us a havening demo for us?
Sure. Is there anything that you would like to, something simple? Would you like to do something? We could do it together. Oh, something for you? Any need that you have at the moment?
Probably let's just do general stress. Like,
okay, that's always somewhere, isn't it?
Hours kind of thing. Yeah.
And what would you like to be instead of stress? What would be the perfect place for you? What would be your haven, your safe haven?
Yeah, I always see, for me, it's always peace. Like I see peace.
Peace. I like that one. Okay, so let's do it the way I talked about earlier. We'll do transpirational first. Now, what part of your body do you feel most comfortable with? Would you like to face haven, or shoulder to elbows, hands, or do you want to mix it up? Because you can do that too.
Yeah, we can mix it up. When you say it, if I want to go intuitively speaking, I feel the arms kind of and the shoulders. Yeah. That kind of speaks to me, but all of it's good.
Okay. So for the people listening, if you want to follow along, I'll just recap what it is. It's very gentle strokes of the face, and you can actually just move your fingertips across your forehead, but like butterfly kisses, really gentle, not pulling the skin, or across your cheeks, or you can just take the whole two hands and bring them from the nose out to the ears. I hope that makes sense. From the nose out to the ears. Okay. So that's the face. Shoulders is, if you just get that little cup at the top of the shoulder where the shoulder goes into the upper arm. Just put your hands there and gently stroke down to your elbows and then circle out and come back up and do that again. Okay. And the hands, it's as if you're wiping sand off your hands, and you can keep them on your lap because that's much more comfortable. And the beauty of self-havening is you can go from the shoulders all the way down to the fingertips and then come back around. Does that make sense? So you're just doing a long stroke from the shoulders to the fingertips.
Yeah.
And all the way down. You can mix it up. It doesn't matter which way you do it. You can do just one. You can do all three. Because sometimes you get a bit fatigued if you're doing the face. It's because you're holding your hands up, your arms up. So what we'll do is we'll start with transpirational. And is it okay for you to say the word stress out loud whilst you haven?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then take as much time as you need. So what all you're doing is you're just havening parts of your body that you feel the most comfortable with. And you're releasing, if you want to imagine the big oak tree, that you're bringing the emotions up from, sorry about the background noise, bringing the emotions up from the roots and through the trunk out onto the branches and to the leaves, and then it expires. So say stress as many times as you need to until you begin to feel less stressed.
Okay. So I just start at the face, make my way down to the arms and the hands, and just saying stress as I go along.
Exactly. And connect it to, if you want to, connect it to some stressful situations in your life, and then allow it to transpire.
Okay. So stress, 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 stress.
How are you doing?
Yeah, there's good. There's something. It is a kind of a strange little thing, isn't it?
Now,
yeah.
Now, just to say, Sarah, that what sometimes happens in transpirational havening is you start with what you think you needed, but something else pops up. I don't know I didn't want to preempt that by telling you that, but sometimes we start with stress and then we find out that we're angry about something. Did anything pop up for you other than stress?
No, it was stress, but I do like that something with the arm thing there. It is like giving like a hug, because I don't know. I sometimes I need I don't know. I'm like not a big hugger myself.
Mm-hmm.
Something about that.
I get it.
It's like felt really, it just felt really kind of like nurturing to myself somehow.
Just a little sidebar. I met a nurse who was in DQ, very, very premature babies that probably 10 years ago might not have survived, but fortunately they do now because we have this technology. And she shared something with me, and they've actually done white papers on this, which she shared that with me as well. The 3 places or the areas that the baby touches to self-soothe when they are not able to be held is they hold their hands, their face in their hands. They hug themselves and they clasp their hands together, which I think is actually beautiful to think about. But also it speaks to why we use these 3 parts of our body to get the most delta waves and the most safety and the self-soothing. So the hugging is definitely a big one, and a lot of us can't hug at the moment. So we really need that. So let us move to the other bookend, which would be the affirmational. So you said peace. Does peace still feel like the place you want to go or want to be?
Yeah, like or calm, or let's do calm.
The beauty of it is midway you can change up and do whatever you want, because you go organically with what comes up. So let us start with, what if I could feel calm, or what if I could be calm, whatever feels right to you to say. Well, let's start with that filter. What if?
So I say that. So what if I could feel calm? Or sorry, what if I could?
While you're havening.
What if I could feel calm?
Do that a couple times.
What if I could feel calm? What if I could feel calm?
Let's move to, I can choose to feel calm, and see what that feels like, if there's any resistance.
I can choose to feel calm. I can choose to feel calm.
How's that one?
Yeah, it's good.
Is that good? We're good to go? Okay, so let's go to I choose to feel calm.
I choose to feel calm. I choose to feel calm. I choose to feel calm.
And how does that one feel?
Yeah, it's nice.
So let's go to I am calm.
I am calm. I am calm.
Is that believable to you? Pardon?
I'm really a calm person.
You are.
How I am.
I'm feeling calm just hearing you say it.
Yeah. No, it is. I know, it's interesting. This whole, I am calm.
Mm. So it's congruent.
Yeah, it's nice.
Beautiful.
Now I'm ready for bed.
Okay, we're done then. But you see, you can do it at any time with anything. And it's sort of like a measure of where you are, or a barometer of where you are. And you're getting your own feedback, which I love. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that your body, the connectedness of the mind and the body is giving you the feedback that you need in that moment. So you'll know when to stop, when to go forward, when to go back. And you could do calm every day and possibly get a different result depending on the landscape of your brain on that day and situation and things like that.
Yeah, it's just it is a calming thing. Like afterwards, I'm sitting here kind of just staring out the window right now as you're talking. I'm like, it is calming. And after the after effect of it.
I think one of the things you mentioned to me was a success story. You mentioned it before when we were talking about this. And I was thinking about it, and there's many, but I thought I would share mine because I think that, and it's, you're reminding me of it as you're talking now. When I started training, I hadn't certified yet, but I started training in Havening, and I was very skeptical. I'm going to put my hand up here. I'm like that. I approach things, with a healthy skepticism and want to have, I'm quite left-brained at time. I want to have proof of things. So, I have very low blood pressure. It's usually about 90 over 60. So I happen to have a blood pressure cuff. And I remember this day I got very hard news about a family member. I actually felt my blood pressure going up. I thought I did, and I felt really hot and overwhelmed. So I thought, I'm going to test this Havening. So I put the blood pressure cuff on, and I was 178 over 125, which for some people isn't high, but it's still high. But for me, it was extraordinarily high. So I thought, this isn't going to work, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I wasn't, really in the right frame of mind, believing. And I started to do what I just did with you. And I did shoulders. So I'd taken the blood pressure cuff off, and I did about 7 to 10 minutes of going through the calm and the cool and the relaxed. I did all of those. And I eventually got to all of them where I am, and I got through all the filters, and I put the blood pressure cuff back on, really not expecting very much. And I was about 125 over 74, which is pretty normal for most people, still a little high for me. And I was really convinced, because I thought 7 to 10 minutes of that, and that can really down-regulate my overwhelming emotions and also bring down my blood pressure. So, and I've seen it in many other ways work for people very quickly. And people say, does it last? Well, it does. It certainly does with event havening, because we've gone back and we've tested it, getting people to remember. We've done a lot of work. I haven't personally, but we have within our organization, havening.org, we work with war veterans, and, they have very complex issues. They've been tracked and, 6 months, a year, whatever later, and it definitely has stuck. The other part of it is you have the ability, once you learn it, to utilize it whenever. So you don't have to wait. And if you feel that it isn't working, then you have the ability to do it again and again and again until you get to the destination that you want to be, that safety or that peace or that calm. So yes, it does work. It really does. And you mentioned Justin Bieber and wife. The Kardashians are into it now as well. I'm not necessarily a fan, but I just thought I would mention that because it's getting a lot of traction at the moment, Havening, because it's such a beautiful technique.
No, it's as I say, it just kind of piqued my interest and I wanted to learn more. And that was I think it's a really great tool to add for you, especially if you're dealing with, obviously on the fertility journey, stress and anxiety and the trauma piece. So if you were having sessions on trauma or PTSD, how many sessions would you recommend? Maybe it's just individual.
Yeah, well, people ask me that. It is how long is a piece of string? I don't know. Some people, they do 3 sessions, but I tend to layer mine up a bit. See, I don't want to do the emotional bypass. I actually want to help people with the traumatic encoding. So I usually do about 6. It depends. I do a very comprehensive intake questionnaire, and I also do a questionnaire with adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. Yeah. So that's a 10-point questionnaire about, what your life was like before 18 years old. And that gives me a lot of information. And then I do a 15-minute call with the person to see if we're a good fit. They don't always have to do the intake questionnaires before that, but some people like to do that. And then I have a lot more information because I know that the success of any treatment, any therapy is the connection between the therapist and the client and the trust and the rapport. So I need to be a good fit for them and they need to be a good fit for me, that I believe I can help them on their journey. So that's when you get a sense of what this person needs. And the thing is that most therapeutic situations, a client will come and say, well, I have insomnia. I had one of those earlier. I have insomnia. Insomnia isn't a thing. It's actually a symptom of something else. And so I like to find out what that something else is and work with that, really get to the core of the issue. And that can be content free. But if you're like this gentleman, when I asked him the question, I said, what does insomnia do for you? And he began to think about it. And he said, well, it gives me more time to get more things done. And when we really got into it, he's just very driven. And there's some childhood trauma that has created this personality adaptation that he feels the need to be high achieving. And he doesn't need money. He's very happy in every part of his life, but he's got this leftover from his childhood. So you see that sort of journey. You can come with insomnia, but it's probably not insomnia. Mm-hmm. It's something that is causing you to have disruptive sleep or whatever. Does that make sense? How I'm explaining it?
Yeah.
In terms of your clients or the people that you work with, they might be having fertility issues, but there might be something else that is, like I said earlier, there might be a birth trauma, or there might be some developmental or relational trauma that is getting in the way, because we know how stress impacts so much on the immune system. So I'm doing a lot of teaching people how to de-stress and, reduce their anxiety in terms of COVID and strengthening their immune system. And immune system is, it's the core of everything for conception. And I work a lot with the vagus nerve as well, which is from the base of the brain down to the gut, and it incorporates the brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. So all of these techniques can help in so many ways to get the woman and the couple in a much better place, because I think there's a lot to do with the man as well in terms of conception. Absolutely. You know that better than I. So you can do no harm. You can absolutely do no harm with Havening.
Perfect. And so definitely check out your YouTube channel, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes. What is the name of the channel? Just so we can say it. I got the link.
Well, it's Michele Para. So if you type in Michele Para after YouTube, it's 2 halves of my name, Michele Paradise. And I have about 30 Havening technique videos on there, because I was invited by Dr. Deepak Chopra to be on his digital wellness platform. I had a channel called The Healing Haven, and I demonstrated and explained. And there's interviews that I have on there. I've interviewed both of the doctors that co-created Havening, and also Paul McKenna, who's an ambassador for Havening. And he actually demonstrated it at the UN a couple years ago. He had the whole audience of the UN Havening themselves, doing some self-Havening. We call it chill without the pill, or Prozac in your palms. That's right. Just for a bit of fun. Yeah. And you can do it anytime, anywhere. And if you don't even have to do the touch. You can imagine yourself doing the touch. So let's say that you're somewhere public and you're feeling really overwhelmed. If you've done it enough times, you can imagine yourself. And I actually do something with, I do a lot of work, as I said, around childhood trauma. And I'll get the client to haven their inner child and calm them down, because they're usually stuck. The inner child is usually stuck, which has caused the situation that the person is in, the trauma that's left over, or the emotions, or the coping strategies, or whatever. So you haven your inner child and you get right to the core.
And so definitely go to havening.org and you can find a practitioner near you. And then so for you, Michele, obviously check out your YouTube channel at Michele Para, and I'll have the link in there. Anything else of where they can reach you if they're
I have a website called Change Your Mind for Good, all letters, no numbers, and I'm sorry about the length of it, but I just love the name because it's directive. I want you to change your mind for good.com, and I've got videos on there and testimonials on there. There's a great book called 15 Minutes to Freedom, compiled by Harry Pickens. And I'm in there amongst, about 30 of us are in there. We each do a little chapter on our experiences with havening, how we've helped people, testimonials, things like that. It's really interesting because it's so many different perspectives and people using it in different ways. Yeah, it's the videos are probably the best because you can see it and you can experience it. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, please reach out through my website, Change Your Mind for Good. And you can book in a free 15-minute havening exploration call. And there's no obligation to work with me. I don't work like that. I believe that people show up when they need to and when it's right for them. I've had people that have reached out 2 years ago and now they've said, I'm ready. And that's fine. That's how it works. There's never any pressure to do a certain amount of sessions with me, because sometimes you get a result very quickly and you might want one a month later or 6 months later or whatever. So I'm very open to that. There are no restrictions or rules and regulations because I meet the client where they are, not where I want them to be. So yeah, I hope that answers the questions, and you can hopefully tell I'm very approachable, and I'm happy to talk to your listeners about any of their questions or needs or whatever might come up after they've listened to this podcast.
Excellent. Yeah. Your YouTube channel, I watched a number of your videos, and it's just, you've got this such a calming voice and presence. So encourage the listeners to check that out and contact you if they want to learn more. Any final thoughts on havening for us, Michele?
Oh gosh, so many. It's easy. It's free. You can do no harm to yourself. And what is really beautiful about it is share it with someone you love. I do couples havening. And you sit across from each other, and because it really helps. Sometimes couples get into trouble in their marriage or in their relationship, and they feel like they're falling out of love or they're not communicating. And you actually haven the other person whilst you remember when you met them, going right back to the beginning of when you met them and what it was that you found attractive or loving or whatever. Get into that space and haven them. And it's just so beautiful. I actually also do it while I watch, on Zoom, and there's lots of tears, mine included, because I really love watching people sort of reconnect with those emotions. Haven your children, especially if they're stressed and they're struggling with homework and remote learning and all of that. Haven your parents. It's such a beautiful thing, especially if somebody in your family has Alzheimer's or dementia. Touch is just magnificent, and sit with them and just stroke their arm or stroke their hand. Babies, stroke their forehead, calms them down, helps them to get to sleep. Yeah, I could go on, but I think you get the idea. You can do no harm. Absolutely do no harm. And always, all I say is just get permission of the person that you're going to haven, that it's okay with them, because sometimes there can be connections, unfortunately, to physical abuse or sexual abuse, and people don't like to be touched on certain parts of their body. So that's the only real great thing I would recommend.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your words of wisdom on this topic. I think it's, as I say, it seems to be hitting the zeitgeist or getting a little more popular now. And obviously you've been doing it for years, and now we're all just sort of starting to hear about it. And I think well, to me, this is the first time I experienced it, and it's just it is calming. It was peaceful and a great thing to help release trauma and help just to dig deeper, especially if you're experiencing obviously stress, anxiety, trauma, sleep issues, and more. So thank you so much for coming on, Michele.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 4 spots available per month to work with us. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. And this call is for you if you meet at least one of these criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This calls for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. That's FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. Melatonin is important for female fertility. It helps regulate hormones and maintain the body's circadian rhythms. Plus, it helps determine the frequency and duration of the menstrual cycle. Plus, it impacts sperm count and motility. Blue and green light negatively impact our melatonin production. That's why we recommend Blue Blocks, blue and green light sleep glasses to all our one-to-one clients. Simply go to Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnant Podcast at checkout to receive your 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnant Podcast. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.